The Belonger, a novel, written by Kathleen Mehuron, and narrated by Kathleen Hewitt. Chapter 16. The sight of the roseate with the rows of stone-rimmed salinas to the left of it, like formal gardens leading up to the house, perked her up a bit. As they drew closer, she couldn't help but admire the remnants of the wooden windmills that had once moved shallow water along to hasten the evaporation of their ancient salt crop. The beautifully made stone walls lining the giant rectangular ponds were still intact, as were dividing walls that broke them into smaller, geometrically similar chambers. She nodded her approval while she paused and took in the sight. "Anthony, how long have these walls held?" "Almost 2 centuries. She already knew this. She just wanted to hear him say it out loud. Wow. Her eyes scanned left to right. A 180-degree view. Now that's craftsmanship. Anthony seemed lost in thought. The family that built the roseate was never given an opportunity to come up with a name for the house, because locals immediately gave it the name it has now, due to its similarity in color to the roseate spoonbill. Have you seen one?" Holly shook her head. "You may have, and mistaken it for an extremely vibrant flamingo. They're not as common as flamingos. There used to be more in the old days, but they're still around. A few rather famous photographs have been taken with the birds in the foreground and your house rising behind it. I have a large framed print in my dining room. I'll show you sometime." "I have one in my living room like that," Holly said. "I wonder if yours is the same one." As one might expect, there were beautifully shuttered windows and deep porches on the north and west sides of her inn. Holly had never given a thought to closing the shutters until now. I wonder what kind of shape the hardware on the shutters is in. "I suspect it's in good shape. The previous owner lived through his fair share of storms." Where there was a door opening, it was built tall and wide, and hinged in a way that its hand-carved doors could be left open to let in the cool morning air. Holly pictured herself coming out the front door to the porch with her morning coffee, and she smiled. She was a long way from New England. The first floor was built like a raised cellar, which, given the prediction for record storm surges, comforted her. Stone steps were built to each entrance, wider at the bottom and becoming narrower as they ascended. Welcoming arms, she remembered. Someone had told her years earlier that this was the term for them, and she saw the sense in that, because she did always feel they were welcoming her home. The crowning glory of the house was the stepped white mansard roof, which gave it the most classic of Caribbean lines. "Almost there," she said. "Brace yourself, young lady," Anthony warned. "The last thing Byron expects to see is you walking through the door." She braced. "Not to mention Montez. This may be the first time I've ever really stood up to Montez Curry, but this is my house, and Byron is my son. I raised him pretty much on my own. Montez will just have to deal with the fact that I am staying here on Grand Turk." Anthony snorted. "Dealing with it and liking it are 2 very different things." Holly felt Anthony watching her gaze into the distance. Seeming to read her mind, he said, "Yes, that house is still glorious after hundreds of years. The family that built it came here for the fortune to be made in the salt trade. The shameful truth was no one in their right mind would choose the punishing work of raking salt, so our entire production was contingent on buying slaves. It is their illustrious ancestors who brought the first African slaves to Turks and Caicos. Mine, too. I have spent an entire lifetime carrying the weight of that inescapable fact. I am unceasingly conflicted about the glory of my old house and the fact that blood money was used to build it. It's a dark thought, I know. But if this hurricane is as massive as they claim, so be it. Perhaps it's time the slave owners' houses are destroyed once and for all." Rendered speechless by this disclosure, Holly was grateful she didn't have to say a word, as Anthony went on with a pinched look on his face. I would like to take a DNA test to see if there's any part inside of me that isn't Caucasian English or Irish. How delighted I would be to find it so. Most of the people I've grown up with, my closest friends on Queen's Quay, are black or of mixed race. What is most difficult, for all of us, I'm sure, is some are even related to the slaves my family originally brought with them. That's something to grapple with, believe me. I don't know whether to hang my head in shame all the time or pretend it never happened. He cast his gaze skyward. In the end, the cost of the enterprise turned out to be far greater than any profits my family made. It was a complete waste of lives, of effort, and, what is worse, of their dignity. Even so, our family came to love Queen's Quay, and we could never entirely leave. As sullied as our name is, we now live as neighbors with the people we once exploited, side by side. Holly staggered for a moment. She decided not to even presume she could come up with any kind of sage response to Anthony's disclosure, so she let her silence speak for itself. She was dripping wet and tired now, but she reminded herself how lucky she was. Many don't have the luxury of taking shelter in a building raised up 12 feet from the ground. I'm glad to be here to help where I can. A sudden gust of wind made the branches of a dead tree rattle. Small pieces of the brittle wood fell to the ground, as if the tree was an old-fashioned fortune-teller throwing bones. They landed in the sand by her feet, in a spiral pattern. Looking down at them, she shuddered. Anthony took her arm and surprised her by saying, "I need to rest for a moment." It seemed a shame to stop now, as they were so close to the house and the shady interior with its thick stone walls. It couldn't be a good sign that Anthony was asking to halt out here in the blazing sunlight. She looked at him closely. He was bent over with both hands on his knees, turning green around the gills. Uncertain as to her next course of action, she left him where he stood and ran ahead to her outdoor shower, where she saturated a small towel with water and pulled a bottle of water off the shelf where she stored a case of them. Anthony had lost his sunglasses when he jumped into North Creek. He shielded his eyes with one hand against the brutal midday light and stumbled toward her and the roseate, one slow step at a time. She opened the front gate for him and held it. Though he still seemed unsteady, he kept plodding his way along. When he got close enough to see her clearly, she held up the washcloth and water as motivation. He managed to laugh. "What are you doing out here, girl? Haven't you heard there's a hurricane coming?" Holly laughed in response, just a little too loudly. Profound relief caused the borderline hysterical edge to enter her voice. For if Anthony was joking around, he probably wasn't having a heart attack. They'd made it home. She rushed forward to greet him. "If you're fool enough to be walking across the island with a hurricane forecasted, I guess I can be outside too." She opened the water and handed it to him. He gratefully accepted and gulped it down while she toweled off his face and the back of his neck with the wet cloth. He pulled away and stared into her eyes in a way that made her heart race. "Never before would I have taken you for an angel," he said softly, and he kissed the back of her hand tenderly. She felt the kiss deep in the pit of her stomach as she stepped closer. She embraced him, knowing full well he would be damp with perspiration, and whispered hoarsely, "That's an exaggeration and you know it. You helped me and I'm helping you. It's as simple as that." Holly was seeing another side of this man, a side she very much enjoyed. He's suddenly adorable. Once we got on that boat, he turned into another person. There's a bottle of shampoo and a bar of soap in the outdoor shower. Get in there, cool off, give me your dry bag and I'll lay out some clean shorts and a t-shirt for when you're done. Sorry if it's not the outfit you'd hoped for. Anthony grinned wickedly. The weathered creases around his eyes cut deep. "Yes, because on this day, which will surely live in history, fashion is what is most important." Terrified at this oblique mention of Nestor, Holly knotted her hands together. She found she could put the power of the hurricane out of her mind for long periods of time when there were tasks to be done. But then anxiety would come rushing back like a mental cyclone. More than once this afternoon, she had prayed that she could stay strong. Anthony didn't need her to fall apart on him. Her internal agony about facing Byron was particularly daunting. She was thinking of her child when she asked, "How bad do you think this weather is going to get?" "No way to know yet, lass." A cryptic half-smile lifted one side of her face. "Lass? What's that all about?" Her expression must have been what made him chuckle. "My family sent me off to Ireland to go to school when I was a boy. I've picked up habits everywhere I've lived." That explains a lot about your accent and speech patterns. I've been trying to place their origins for a while. I love to read about Ireland. Where exactly did you live? Dublin, as one might expect. The compulsory education here in Turks and Caicos ends at age 16. My parents wanted more education for me, so off to Europe I went. For 2 long and lonely years. "Why Ireland?" she asked, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "Mother has family there." He chugged another draught of water and wiped his mouth off with the back of his hand. She thought of her own arduous journey to an education. The years she'd struggled to pay for school and keep a roof over her head had scarred her. Families who assumed it was their responsibility to pay their children's way in the world always fascinated her. "Did you go to college too?" "Yes, of course. My parents wouldn't have settled for less." He gave her a wink and turned to study the horizon. At this moment, there was nothing more interesting to her than where Anthony had studied. She wanted to know if he'd been able to stay at the school for all 4 years, and if he'd had to work at all, or if he'd actually been able to participate in extracurricular activities. When people talked about fraternities and sororities, she was stymied. How would it have felt to have that kind of time on her hands? "Where did you go?" she pressed. Anthony was distracted by something. "The flocks of birds that normally feed in the Salinas, they've all vanished," he said, his eyes as wide as she had ever seen them. "So?" Holly asked, not knowing at all where his thoughts were leading. "That's a bad sign. A very bad sign." Once again, her first thought was Byron. Without birdsong, the air was filled with a deathly silence punctuated only by the sound of crashing waves. Her stomach tumbled in panic. It made no sense at all, but she swatted the back of her head wildly, like she'd just been stung by a bee, trying to ward off the ephemeral threat of danger. Holly longed to fill the quiet, to return to some kind of normal, to be delivered from her paralyzing fear, so she latched onto the question Anthony had left unanswered. "Where was it you said you went to school?" His nose wrinkled as if he'd eaten something rotten. "Harvard," he nearly spat out. "Feckin' Boston." He paled again and bent over to put his hands on his knees for the second time that day. We are both losing our minds over this. A choking took hold of him. It seemed he couldn't find his breath, and he kept clearing his throat over and over again. Holly reached out and rubbed the small of his back. It didn't help. She once again wondered, given his age, the heat of the day, and the stress of the situation, if he was going into cardiac arrest. In the interest of soothing him, she played her concern close to the vest. "Go cool off. Get cleaned up and you'll feel so much better." He nodded at her obediently, and when his choking calmed down to the point that he could stand back up, he finished the rest of his water. Holly took the empty container from him. "I'm going to start securing the windows, if Byron hasn't started already, in which case I'll help. Then I'm headed for the kitchen to do a quick inventory of food, water, and I don't know what else. General supplies, I suppose." Holly was eager to do something, anything, to relieve the thick tension they seemed to be steeped in at the moment. The volume of the alarm bell that had been ringing in her own head on and off for most of the day was deafening. She spun around playfully on her heels and shot a parting comment over her right shoulder. "You might want to let yourself into the bar after your shower and start hauling bottles of booze up there." He laughed heartily. "Priorities, my dear Holly." She tossed her hair. "Yes, I have heard you say it so many times. We must all have our priorities. We'll all have a good stiff drink when we get this place sealed up, Lord Bascombe. Let's look forward to that. I hope I can get a shower in too. I smell like fear. I'm lucky all the wild dogs haven't come running to get me." Chapter 17. As Holly walked from room to room, she stood in the open doorways and ran her fingers down the dark, polished hardwood of the moldings, just appreciating the old house. She loved that it had good bones, as she had heard builders and real estate agents say, and that it was filled with interesting architectural details and antiques. To lose this place would be devastating. All of the work we have done on it. It was her home, her business, the place where she had started over. She circled back to the living room and dragged a chair up to a large window that was about 4 feet off the floor. Its hinged sashes were thrown wide open, and its sill was wide enough for her to stand on, as the limestone wall was nearly 2 feet wide. Anthony showed up just as she stepped onto the sill. He climbed up beside her. Squeezed into the frame, side by side, they leaned out to examine the antique hardware of the shutters. "They haven't had to shutter the place up in over 10 years, Holly said. "But the hinges and latches look like they will hold just fine to me. What do you think?" Anthony nodded. "Looks sturdy enough. But then, looks can be deceiving. I don't know, dear. We're going to be closed in here for a long time. Besides the occasional gust, there's no sign of the storm yet. Well, the bird's leaving. Granted, that's a big indication. But let's talk about our overall strategy before we seal things up." She gladly deferred to his experience, since she had never been caught in a hurricane before. "I've been buried in snow before. One time we lost power for 3 days," she told him. "But hurricanes aren't exactly common up in the Green Mountains of Vermont." In the end, they decided that as long as the sun was still shining, they would let fresh air circulate throughout the house. Only when the wind really began to blow and the sky was completely covered with clouds would they begin the process of closing it up. There were plenty of other things they needed to attend to until then. Humidity and heat were a fact of life in the Caribbean. Anthony described vivid memories of the suffocating stuffiness he'd endured during previous storms. But there were other difficulties, too. "There's no avoiding it. You have to make the house as tight as possible, or it springs leaks and the water streams in. After what we experienced with Hurricane Ike, it's good that you've sealed most of the window panes around the outside with silicone. If, in fact, this storm develops into a Category 4 or 5 over the island, we'll have jets of water coming in everywhere with the wind and air pressure changes." Holly stared into space, trying to imagine how this happened and what the living room would look like when it did. Anthony climbed down from the window on legs that seemed stiff. Once he made it down to the old wood floor, he leaned against the wall and stretched them out like a runner, taking a moment. He stopped when he spotted Byron. At the same moment, Holly saw him. Holly suspected her son had been standing there for a while, waiting for them to finish their inspection. A dead quiet prevailed for several seconds. "What are you doing here?" he asked them. Anthony reached a hand up and helped Holly down. "I told you I wasn't leaving you," she said. "I meant it." Though she accepted Anthony's offer of help, it was a long step down, she told him, "I'm tougher than you seem to think. I jump off the seawall almost every day, you know." He shrugged at her with a wounded look on his face, and Holly regretted saying it. She knew he was only trying to be a gentleman. In fact, gallantry seemed to have been bred into him. Anthony turned toward Byron, looking like a schoolboy who has just been reprimanded. "Are you staying here too?" Byron asked him. He nodded. "Put the boat in North Creek. It's going to get a bit crowded. Dad went to get Mommy and Puppy. And Samira, Lord help us." "Your grandparents can have the big bedroom at the front of the house," Holly said, They should be on the first floor. Mommy can't do stairs anymore. Your dad and Samira can be with you on the second story. I really don't want anyone up on the third, just in case we lose part of the roof. Anthony, you can have the second bedroom in my apartment. It's small, but right near the bathroom. That all makes sense, doesn't it? Byron looked at the ceiling. Oh boy, I don't know what Mommy and Poppy are going to make of that. Make of what? You having Anthony in your place. Seriously? How many girlfriends has your father had over the last 20 years? Yeah, but they're used to that. And they seem to think it's different for a man. They're always telling me how grateful they are that you haven't brought another man into my life, like I'm still 6 years old. Do you have any silicone around? Anthony asked. I don't like the look of a few windows at the back of the house. Byron smiled. Yep. And I bought them out of caulking cord, too. I'm going to start jamming it into any gap I can find between the windows and door jambs and the old stone walls. We'll try to get the place as waterproof as possible. Anthony looked like he was thinking things over. After some seconds, he asked, We're just going to work up here on the first floor, right? For now, anyway. Holly nodded emphatically. Yes. There's no way to secure the cellar. It has those big loading doors all around. We can lock them shut, but flooding is something to be expected. It's the reason the main house was raised up in the first place. We should assume anything stored down there will be destroyed. Oh, shoot. I should bring up the gas grill. Byron stopped her. I already did it. I brought up anything I thought would be necessary and useful. Holly winked at Byron. He was always telling her to stop acting like he was a child. Now here he was, proving how strong and capable he actually was. Thank you, Anthony said. I'm sorry I haven't been of more help. I was feeling a little peaked for a while. Byron shrugged. Like my grandparents say, don't hurt up your head. One hand does wash the other. Anthony laughed out loud. Thank you, young man, but I really do feel I need to earn my keep. Feel free to ask me to do anything. Holly clapped her hands together. Okay, the caulking then. We've got lots of caulking material. Before we do our own bedrooms, I think we should focus on the living and dining rooms. The government will shut the power off to the entire island at some point today. There's no telling how long we have to work. Byron's mouth dropped open. Why would they do that? It's just common sense, Holly said. There will be poles blowing down, and those live wires can cause all kinds of problems. Years ago, after another storm, an islander was electrocuted, even though he was 35 feet away from the downed power line that was still live. Anthony added, It was a lesson we all took to heart. The nor'easters and blizzards Holly had weathered back home were crazy enough. What kind of havoc will happen here? She and Byron had been shocked the first time they returned to Grand Turk after Hurricane Ike. The island had been a mess, and they'd heard stories that had stuck with them. But neither of them had been trapped in anything like this before either. Anthony must have sensed her tension, because he moved nearer to her. No matter what happens, we can still cook, since you have a propane cooktop and oven. We'll have to light it with matches, but that's easy enough. He looked into her eyes with a tenderness that made her feel just a wee bit safer. Byron laughed at him, interrupting the touching moment. You're going to worry about fine cuisine at a moment like this? If we don't have electricity for days on end, we'll have to use up everything you have stored in your chest freezer. Guessing you two have a solid stock of meat in there. Am I right? Holly nodded. Good. You don't want to be hungry like we were the last time. With your reserves, we won't starve. It sounded like Anthony remembered Ike well, though it had happened many years before. Of course, I don't know if I'll have any appetite. It felt like we were imprisoned last time. It made me a little crazy. And sick to my stomach, to be true. Byron slapped him on one shoulder. But you survived, didn't you? And no worse for wear, from what I can tell. Nothing kills my appetite. Holly jumped in. I'm always hungry. Except for, well, the vertigo. But that doesn't happen very often. She picked up 2 rolls of the white caulking cord. So we push this into any holes or gaps we come across? What about if we find older caulking that's already been done? Do we pull it out and replace it? Leave any that's already in place where it is, Anthony quickly answered. It might be hard to scrape out, and I think you'd do more damage than good, don't you? She nodded in agreement. Do you want to start in here, or the kitchen? Whatever you want to do is fine, but I thought I'd start with the kitchen. Everything we really need is in there. If I don't have time to get to my room before the storm hits, I can sleep on the kitchen floor, but most things in there are irreplaceable. She gave him a brief nod. That's good thinking. Go ahead. Will do. Anthony gave her a smart salute. And Holly, thank you for having me. She bowed her head. You are most welcome, Lord Bascombe. Oh, and I wasn't kidding about the bottles of liquor. Before you caulk, why don't you haul some up and bring them to me in the kitchen? Certainly, madame. Mademoiselle, I have told you 1,000,000 times. The clock on the wall chimed 3 times. They all stared at it in a bit of a daze. The sound seemed to hang in the air. Holly's heart started pounding wildly, as if a great weight had just descended upon her chest. Time is short, guys. Let's move. She took off down the hall toward the kitchen at a dead run. Chapter 18. The moon broke through the clouds racing across the sky from time to time as the evening progressed. But by the time Byron and Holly pulled the last of the shutters inward and threw their locks closed, it was pitch black outside. The howling winds made the old house groan and created a ghostly sound as it traveled down the chimney. Holly followed Byron into the kitchen, where they found Anthony, Sanford, and Coralise leaning against the gleaming copper kitchen counter, watching Samira chop vegetables. An exhausted Holly plopped down in the small breakfast nook to rest for a moment. At least that dizziness is gone. She realized who was missing. Montez? She asked the room. Samira pursed her lips. He went upstairs to take a nap. A nap. She didn't seem happy as she continued chopping the garlic and red onion on the cutting board in front of her. Holly shrugged at the others. I keep feeling like there's still something to be done, although I can't think what it is. A couple of the shutters had locks that were a bit suspect, so we screwed them completely shut. We've moved everything up here. We're sealed up as best as we can be. Coralise? Sanford? Are you settled in? We are fine, dear girl. Can't thank you enough for having us. Byron would be worrying about you day and night if you weren't with us here at the Roseate. Isn't that right, Byron? You are doing me the favor, believe me. The group chuckled at this, but everyone quickly grew quiet. Nerves were taking over. Holly didn't move at all as she watched Anthony. She was waiting for him to gather his thoughts. All that could be heard above the howl of the wind was his breathing, which seemed louder than usual. She thought he might actually be wheezing. Are you allergic to dust? She asked, thinking about all the dirt she'd encountered in the tight spaces of the old house that day. He waved away her concern. I'll be fine. I'll step out on the porch in a few minutes and the fresh air will clear me out. First, I need to get back to something we talked about earlier. As I've already explained, if the storm is big enough and gets close enough, streams of water will shoot in. It's just something that happens. Why? Holly asked. It's the air pressure, Sanford explained. There's a noise like the sound a straw makes on the bottom of a glass, a great sucking noise, and that's what's happening. Any place the water can be pulled in, it is. Streams shoot in around the windows, along the plumbing and electrical wires, through any path it can find. Coralise visibly shuddered. Samira, I need something to do, she said. Shall I chop those carrots? Do we have another board? Holly put her fingertips to her forehead. The combination of water and electric wires sounds really menacing. Honestly. A brainstorm hit her, and her eyes widened. Should we move the beds as far away from the windows as possible? Anthony and Byron responded at the same time. Absolutely. The old folks have always said this area of town is a hurricane hole, Byron added, but direct hits have happened here before. You said Queen's Cay is a hurricane hole, Holly countered. Are those even real, or just a myth? Anthony held a closed fist to his mouth. His voice sounded grave. We shall see, won't we? Holly's mind reeled with ideas. Let's move the couches, too. You know what else? I'm going to put all the bathroom towels in the hall closet by the bathroom. That's as close to the center of the house as you can get. Best chance of keeping them dry. Anthony nodded thoughtfully. Excellent idea. Bossy as an old school teacher, Holly continued. Only take the towels out one at a time as you're using them. We'll store them in garbage bags on the shelves. We can put our clothes in that closet as well. The shelves are really deep. There's plenty of room for everything. She turned her attention to Sanford. Go take the easy chair in the living room, won't you? I can tell your bad knee is bothering you with this weather. Do you want some Advil? Thank you, darling. I took some already. He started limping toward the living room. You're right. I'll just rest a spell. As if it were pre-agreed, Holly, Anthony, and Byron darted off on their furniture-moving mission, which seemed paramount to complete as soon as possible. Moving furniture was easier than Holly feared. Within minutes, they were done and back in the kitchen. Holly checked her phone. I've gotten word from Erica that the power will be cut off at 10 o'clock, which also means there won't be any cell phone reception. She felt a pressing need to call the Trombleys in Vermont and speak to them one more time. They would be following the news and feeling a bit panicked, but she barely had one bar of reception. Remembering that Anthony had been making calls throughout the day, she asked, May I use your phone? It's to call the States. He handed over his cell without question, and she treated him with a small smile of thanks. She thought to step out on the porch as the call went through, but she reconsidered when she caught the look on Byron's face. The Trombleys were practically family. She put the phone on speaker as Toby answered. Hi, Toby, Holly said. Is Sally with you? Right here. Sally's familiar voice piped up. We are still in one piece and everything. Love you guys, Byron jumped in. But we're in a hurry. They're going to cut the power soon. Toby? Sally? Holly felt her throat grow tight. I just wanted to tell you one more time that I love you. I'm so grateful for all you did for Byron and me. I don't know where I would be without all your help, especially when I was a kid. No point in being dramatic, Mom, Byron said, giving her an exasperated look. It's bad enough as it is. We've shuttered all the windows, weatherproofed the house as best we can. We'll be okay. Love you guys. We will call afterwards, as soon as we can. Now we gotta go, right, Mom? Holly blinked back tears. I'm not being dramatic. We're saying lots of prayers, Sally said. The whole family is. Byron, you listen to your mother. Byron, give your mother a little room to feel something, Toby said. I'm sure it's scary. Not everyone can say they've lived through a catastrophic hurricane, but that's exactly what you two are going to do, you hear me? You are going to get through it. His voice cracked. I can't imagine a world without you two in it. Holly started to cry. Give my love to everyone. We will call you after it's over. Tears became sobs when she pressed the button to end the call. Whatever comfort she'd wanted from the conversation, she hadn't gotten it. But there was no time to stew about it. She felt a strain to get the meal on the table since they wouldn't have water pressure once the electricity went out. They could still get water from the cistern in the ground level, but it would be a heck of a lot easier cleaning up with hot running water instead of hauling buckets up to the kitchen sink. She sighed and slumped over the stove with a hand on each side of it. So tired. Anthony, could you fire up the gas grill? The side dishes are almost done. I'm going to get some fresh air before we eat, Coralie sang out, like they were having Sunday dinner instead of awaiting chaos. I'll come with you, Mummy, Byron said. We won't be too long, Mom. Holly knew that no one was sure when they would eat again, what their reality would be in 12 hours. Who will be left alive? She said a prayer and moved on. They still had the front and back doors open to provide some air. As the wind was already kicking up, Anthony lit the grill in the foyer and then carefully rolled it toward the door as far as the propane tank hose would allow. He repeated the same procedure 3 times before he got it outside and away from the house. Holly had left 7 steaks and a roast, a precious commodity on Grand Turk, on the counter to thaw while they were working earlier. Now Samira was at the kitchen stove, searing the pork roast in a rub so aromatic that it made Holly instantly ravenous. "The roast is for tomorrow," Holly told her flatly. "Chances are we won't be able to cook then, despite what Anthony says." Anthony was in the dining room. She heard him open and close several cabinets and drawers as he gathered items, trying to make a special table despite the circumstances, or maybe because of them. As if once again reading her mind, Anthony spun to face her through the archway. "I'm determined to make this night one of celebration. It's an approach that has served me well before." One of Holly's brows lifted with curiosity. "I know from unfortunate experience that the longer we are sealed up in here, with only buckets of water to use for washing, the crankier people will get. Some may even get a little crazy." He held up 3 bottles of wine. Good wine, Holly noted. Where had he unearthed them? She let out a nervous giggle. Though there was fear in the pit of her stomach, she was game to try to set it aside and have some fun. One thing the locals said about her was that she was always willing to give it a go. Well, that's what the Brits and Canadians said. The belongers put it this way: "She don't cut no die do." Between cultures, a consensus had been reached. Holly was considered a go-getter. Time to prove them right.